Yes.
That's how sick she was. She lost a whole week.
Man.
Thank you.
I have a pen on
Glad
my
that she's
desk
doing
for
better.
some reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
In my prayers for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, dear. Otherwise, I would steal it because it looks like a good one.
It's really not. It's overrated.
Look at this jam-packed house.
Are you
They all
guys
came
ready?
to see me? How are they? Hi.
Are you guys ready?
Ready to go.
Hello. It is April 10th, 2019. We're in the we're at a Board of Education regular meeting. We're in the LRC, what I call it at my work, and it's not called it here. We're in the Monterey Media Center. It is 7 p.m. Call to order, please, Mr. Muccio.
Mrs. Etter.
Here.
Mr. Naaman.
Here.
Mr. Suchaki.
Here.
Mrs. Schuker.
Here. Mr. Dobbins is absent, so 4 present, 1 absent at this time. If everyone could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance On behalf of the board, I would like to welcome all students, staff, and interested community members to tonight's Board of Education meeting. The board values and encourages public comment on education issues. Anyone having an interest in actions of the board may participate during the public comment section. The sign-up sheet, if you could identify yourself, is over on that orange counter area. A copy of the board meeting agenda is available for review on our school district's website, which is www.cuyhts.org, under the Board of Education meetings. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting. We have lots of great presentations coming up. If I can have a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Naaman,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Suchaki. Any discussion? Hearing none.
Mr. Naaman.
Aye.
Mr. Suchaki.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mrs. Schuker.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Next up are the start of the presentations. Who's Mr. Evans?
This is absolutely the best thing that we get to do here as a educational institution. That's recognize students for outstanding achievement. And we have much to be thankful for at Cuyahoga Heights, as you can see by how full we are this evening. So, and it's great that nobody's screaming, yelling, or throwing anything at us up front here. So, not that that's ever happened before. We're going to start with some student recognitions, and here's how we're going to work it, parents. We're going to call the students up, and I'm going to have somebody help me hand out the certificates, and then I'll call up the advisor and have the advisor explain to everybody what the activity was and why we're recognizing them this evening. And then we're going to take some pictures, and we encourage you to get pictures of the young people, and make sure you get some to me, because if you haven't noticed lately, I'm just a fiend on Twitter, man. I'm tweeting everything out lately, so I'm all over it. So at this time, Mrs. Houcham, will you come up and give me a hand here? We're going to recognize the students, some fifth graders who participated in the Greater Cleveland Math Competition. We had 2 teams that were entered in the competition. The first group was the champions group, and that was Gavin Klein, Tristan Lee, Anastasia Radkowski, and Nathan Wilson. Our second team was the Rising Stars, and that was Daniel Chahaki. Stay up, stay up, stay up, stay up. No running away. Oh, we're getting pictures of you. Not that easy. Oh, no way. Daniel Chahaki, Harrison Frank, Christopher Tretiak, and Tristan West. And I'm going to ask Mrs. Boswell to come up and tell us a little bit about the competition. I read some of it online, and it sounds like both these teams did an outstanding job. And I think this is our first time at this competition. So,
Good evening. I'm Mrs. Boswell, and I get to see these guys every day, and it's a great honor. The Greater Cleveland Math Competition is put on by the Teachers Council of Mathematics in Cuyahoga County. And what we do is there are several schools in Northeast Ohio. It's not just Cuyahoga County, but ours was, but it's all over Northeast Ohio, down through Akron and Canton. and they compete as a team. It is a competition where they have to use critical thinking, problem solving, mathematical skills, lots of them, and teamwork, which was what really drove me to taking them there to learn how to work together. They all went in with a different strength in a mathematical concept, put it all together. We practiced starting in December. Does that sound right? December, January, and what's that? January. Okay, in January, right at the beginning of January, and we practiced all the way through to mid-February, which was when the competition was held. We're definitely going back next year. I think that they had a good time. It was very fun at the end when everybody gathered in the gymnasium, and to see the pride on their faces, it was absolutely amazing. So I owe them a lot, and I think that they deserve a huge round of applause for what they did.
I think Mrs. Boswell's being a little bit humble too, because it's my understanding that we haven't been in this competition before, and afterwards, they were asking where these two groups came from. They wanted to know what school they were from because they performed so well. So for a first time out, sometimes when you go to these competitions, if you don't know the lay of the land, and some of these people have been running those competitions for a long, long time, it's tough to kind of get to know what they're doing, and maybe it takes you a year or two to adjust, but my understanding was that our two teams hit the ground running and really impressed some people over at the math competition. So, gentlemen, congratulations. Thank you. The next group we're going to recognize is the Noetic, I got that one out, Mathematics Learning Competition. The first group were the fourth graders, and we had a class champion, National Honorable Mention Madden Patel, National Honorable Mention Eric Lee, and participants Caitlin Amari, Brody Ellis, Timothy Sagan, and Jonica Urbanik.
All right.
Hang tight up here, group. And I know that we're missing some tonight because we try to do this on the perfect night, but I know soccer and baseball, softball, and track, and every sport under the planet's going on tonight. So students stop me in the hallway all day today, tell me that they couldn't make it tonight, and we're still going to recognize them here. The fifth graders, class champion and national honorable mention, Tristan Lee. Participants. It's been a long day, Mr. Evans. It's because Mr. Atwell kept me out late last night at the track meet. Daniel Chahaki, Gavin Klein, Harrison Frank, and Jackson Justice. Anastasia Radkowski, Christopher Trechak, and Nathan Wilson. And Mrs. Boswell is going to tell you a little bit about this as well.
This competition is a little bit different in that it was held in the classroom. It is a paper pencil test, and it was all individual, their individual work that they could do. It was heavily focused on problem solving, not just doing a math computation, but actually applying it to outside into the real world. And we are doing another one here after air testing. They have one more to do for the spring Noetic, and they practice it ever since we signed up for it. It was exciting because as soon as I announced that we were going to try this, they're like, okay, let's go, let's do it. First they were a little like, I don't want to do this, but then they saw that they really could challenge themselves, and they stepped up to the plate and did a great job. So we will do one more for the spring, and that'll be after our air testing, and we'll keep you posted how they do. So congratulations.
Students, hold on. Students, in the first group, I'm sorry, you guys are sneaking off on me. We have a little tradition that we go down and we shake the board members' hands here. So we're going to get you used to doing this for many, many years to come as we bring you up here and recognize you.
Congratulations, great job.
I'm surprised Mrs. Schuker didn't stop me on the first go-around.
Nice job.
Good job, congratulations.
Congratulations,
Congratulations,
Nathan.
great job.
Congratulations.
Good job.
Nice job.
Congratulations, good job.
Congrats to you. Good job.
The next group of students we're going to recognize this evening are our Science Olympiad competitions. This year was held at Case Western Reserve. The students that participated in Science Olympiad, Jackie Chen, Gabriella Kolecki, Gemma D'Amico, Harrison Frank, Jocelyn Kaczynski, Nicholas Nemeth, Amari Rodriguez, Tristan West, Marco Shafalo, William Conroy, Davina Donardis, Damian Jones, Andrew Kurta, Madden Patel, Heidi Stegelmeyer, Daniel Chahaki, Riley Conte, Jasmine Figured, Jackson Justice, Nathan Mandich, Anthony Rocco, and Samantha Valley. And Mr. Taylor has been our advisor for a few years, and he's going to come up and tell you a little bit about some of the different things that the students were involved in, and this is always kind of exciting because this really does, the students really do put a lot of effort and a lot of creativity into the Science Olympiad competition. So, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. I just want to say, before I talk about the Science Olympiad too much, this is a record-breaking team that's in front of you tonight. They earned 5 medals in 5 different events. Some of the kids are wearing their medals. This competition is extremely tough. We started right after Thanksgiving, and we worked 2 nights a week, every week, all the way up until March 5th or whenever the competition was. And on that last week, we were in there every single night, trying to get our events done. This team put all their effort into it. I am proud to say everybody up here who built something, they did it all themselves. I do not allow the projects to go home because I know what happens when they do go home. And I want control a little bit of the projects and make sure that the projects are done. And they did it. And they worked extremely hard. I want to show off some of the things that they did. But before we show off, let's just talk about, we'll just go down the line, guys. I know you didn't want to talk, just yell out what your event was.
Simple machines and simple machines. Optics, answer and adding, bridge building, optics, motions and poisons, everything, what went by. We'll write it to it and
Mystery architecture design, yep. So let's bring up the trebuchet. Let's show off the trebuchet. The trebuchet team, bring it up carefully. I thought Mr. Evans said we'd have to be careful because things could blow up and explode. But it might happen. It could happen.
That's why I say
They're gonna toss something, huh?
Mr. Taylor, can we
Yes.
have the kids sit maybe so
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can
you guys
see?
can sit
No,
down. Sorry, you guys
just
can
because
see
this is
we
fun
can see the
stuff.
board.
These kids are tall.
Yes, it's getting bigger. Now, this is a trebuchet that the kids built.
Thank you, guys.
I can hold it up. Made all out of PVC pipe. This event, it has to be a certain dimension. And this thing, they actually put it on the ground and at the competition, they measure or tape measure it, make sure it's perfect. What'll happen here is they're gonna put a counterweight on this hook, and you can see they had to test it a lot. On this hook, the hook's all bent up, and then they have a certain amount of weight that they're gonna end up throwing. And when they put the trebuchet in, there's a pin, or when they put the weight on this end, there's a pin that holds this down. And then when they pull that pin, whatever they've got here is going to be thrown and go a certain distance. Now, the science behind this event is once you get this thing built, you don't know until the competition date what the weight is that you're gonna be throwing. So they have to test a certain range of weights and completely keep testing it and testing it. The object is to throw that weight into a bucket a certain distance away. The more points, the farther you can get your trebuchet to throw, the more points you get. So you have to completely just test and test and test, and then you make a chart, and the day of the competition, they set it up, and they're notified of what their weight is gonna be that they're throwing that night, and they look on the chart and say, set the bucket up 6 meters away. And then they'll say, they get on 4, they pull the pin, it throws it, and hopefully it goes in the bucket. This year, did we hit the bucket, get it into the bucket? No. This trebuchet was tough. In some years, you build them, and it throws and it's consistent. This one, we would throw it, and one weight would throw 7 meters, and then 2 seconds later, we'd load it, throw it again, and it would flop over and go 2 feet. You know, and we're like, what? What just happened? We thought we had it. So we would keep testing again and again. So this was a trebuchet. We ended up coming in 7th out of 13, 8 out of 13 this year. It was a great event for these guys. Very good. Let's bring up the mousetrap vehicle. Anthony Rocco and Jackson worked on this mousetrap vehicle. The mousetrap vehicle works like this. The kids could tell you, but they don't want to talk as much as they want. But this mousetrap vehicle, there is a piece of fishing line on this end. You will set this mousetrap, and they had to learn to be careful because it is a real mousetrap. You set it, and you wrap this string around the rear axle of the mousetrap car. And you set it and hold it. They put it on the ground. They stick a pencil in the trap, which releases the trap, and this arm attached to the string pulls on that rear axle and will create the car movement and go down the hallway. This car is supposed to go 10 meters and stop on an X 10 meters away. We did it in class. Our Science Olympiad moment for these boys happened at school. And a lot of times that happens where we're testing it, this thing is popping, it's doing papa wheelies, a lot of science went into, why are the wheels just spinning? Well, what are we gonna do to make the wheels stop spinning? Well, let's put some balloons on it, give it some traction. And then we put some traction on it, and all of a sudden, this car started moving down the hallway. And it was like, whoa, it's moving now. And now it's starting to go crooked. Well, how can we stop it from running into the walls now? So we gotta figure out that. A lot of science went into it. Last night, before the competition, this thing rolled out and went 15 meters. We couldn't believe it. It had never done that before. So we were like, well, okay, we'll take that, 15 meters, we'll be all right with that. And then we got to the competition, and I didn't want to tell the story, but something happened to the car during the competition, that a little girl came up, and it was impound, a little boy or girl came up and grabbed their car and threw it on the ground. And it was out of our possession. At the competition, you have to impound the car. They don't want us working on it all day until your testing time. So you have to, 8 o'clock in the morning, you have to take this car and drop it off at the testing site. And the boys were going down to test the car and run it. And when they get down there, this little rogue child runs up and just grabs it and he throws it on the ground, and there was nothing we could do. It was
Sabotage.
I didn't even know, and I don't think the judges knew what to do. There was nothing they could do. It was like, well, the car just broke. I mean, so they gave them 30 minutes to put it back together. They duct taped it. They ended up coming in
Homeland Security
6
investigation.
out of 13, even with a broken car. So nicely done.
Wow.
Bridge builders, come on up, bridge builders. Oh, we just got one builder here tonight. Heidi Stiegemeyer also built this bridge with A.J. Curta. A.J.'s gonna get a workout lifting that bucket. All right, so we can show you really quickly. This is just a bucket of sand. This is the bridge that they built. A.J., don't go too far away. So what they would do is this bridge, AJ, you pretend like you're the table with one hand. Yeah, like that. The bridge would sit on a table like this. This bucket would be empty, and the bucket will hook onto this hook coming off the bridge. And then they're trying to put as much sand into that bucket as they can without breaking this bridge. And this bridge weighed, this isn't the exact bridge because there's broke. 24 grams. This thing is like, it's so light. I mean, it just can be tossed around. This bucket of sand, they can get it up to a point where it's up into this area. I mean, you're talking 40, 50 pounds of sand that this bridge ended up holding. During the competition, it ended up breaking, which wasn't a bad thing because their bridge was so light. What was it this year? 24 grams, something like that. It was so light. It was an incredibly light bridge. And basically, it's a ratio they work out, and how much weight compared to the weight of their bridge, and they ended up getting 4th place this year, in earning medals this year. Congratulations to the bridge building team. Let's bring Rockhound up. Rockhound. The girls will just show you. They've got a big box of rocks. And this is an example of a testing event. There's nothing to be built here. All the girls needed to do was learn every rock in this box. And they had to memorize them, learn what the texture of them, learn if it marks a strike plate. There was all kinds of things they needed to do with these rocks. And there's like 75 rocks in that box that they had to memorize. And They did a phenomenal job, and they chose, and that's the thing I want to stress too. All of these students chose to do this. This is an after-school activity. They came, and when we put up the flyer, these kids came knocking on my door saying, I want to be part of this. And that's really, really impressive that they really wanted to be in this. So, thank you, girls. Very good. And the last group is optics. Come up to optics.
What was the last one?
Optics.
Optics.
Now, it doesn't show like much. They've got 2 mirrors in their hand. But these mirrors, they had a laser. Their job was to move that laser around a room, and there was obstacles around there, but they had to move the laser around and try to have it make and hit a target. And the trick to that is everybody can do it when the laser's on. But the trick is when you have the laser off and you're working with those angles of those mirrors and 45s, knowing what the angle of reflection is, what the boys did know, and then trying to get to move that. And you flip on, you put all your mirrors down, you flip on the laser, and all of a sudden, and it's supposed to hit the target. If your mirror's off by this much, it ends up being off by about this much when you get down to the science of it. So, very nice. Nicely done, boys. Thank you to the school board. Thank you for all of you guys coming to see us tonight, but thank you to the school board for having us over tonight. We really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We're going to get you guys to pose, though. First of all, we want 2 rows so Mrs. Houchin can get a good picture, because you guys are kind of spread out. We can bring 1 row out in front here. Rumor has it, with the mousetrap thing, that was an Independence kid that went and sabotaged it. I don't know if there's any truth to that or not. That's just what I heard, though, so.
You're very good at
That's
that.
what I heard.
So Jonathan called about the play rehearsal yesterday.
You called that?
Yeah,
And?
he's good.
Okay.
Played second base, started second. He's a good injury.
Parents, get a picture.
He's hitting like through 8 games, he's hitting like 524. Playing shortstop, pitching.
So they actually had some games already?
He played 8 games already.
Oh my gosh. Good for them. That's somewhat unheard of. That's how I remember that.
And while they're shaking hands, the elementary school has a couple other big events coming up. This Friday evening is Family Game Night and the Art Show, so we hope that you can make it over to that. That's turned into a huge event for us. Mrs. Harvan and Miss Ryan put their heart and soul into that, along with the other elementary teachers. That's always a great event. And then also coming up in the spring, we have a STEM Day, and Mrs. Curry's got set up, and I know Independence comes over and does activities with us, and I think Orange is going to come over this year, where they'll be out on the football field doing all kinds of science experiments, and it's really a fantastic day for our elementary students. So we urge you to come up and see what's going on and take part in whatever you can. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
We've got some athletic recognitions tonight as well. Would Mr. Kelber come up? For those of you that don't know, Mr. Kelber is our first-year athletic director. We stole him away from Brooklyn High School, and I had somebody from another school come up to me last night and say, that's the best hire you guys have made in a long time. So I didn't tell him till after we hired him, though, because he's an old hockey coach. We don't have hockey at Cuyahoga Heights, so. But I waited till we had him under contract before I told him that, so. We'd like to recognize some Chagrin Valley Conference all-academic students this year. And this is certainly this is a very prestigious award for us. Receiving all-academic in the league this year, Stephanie Atwell, swimming. Mara Wojtek, swimming. Morgan Yunke, swimming. Luke Hopkins, wrestling. Nassim Salem, basketball. Brooke Wilson in both basketball and gymnastics. Victoria Santiago, basketball. Lauren Adamo, cheerleading. Nicolette Crocker, cheerleading. Brianna D'Ambrosia, cheerleading. Logan Diedrich, bowling. these are all seniors. Yeah, everybody's a senior up here. And the best part for me is that the senior lockers are right outside my office. And the senior class officers are actually the ones that get to decide who's in what locker. So I'm always curious as to see who they're going to put close to my office. And actually, Steffi and Morgan are some of the officers. They're right there. They're right across from me. And I have to tell you, parents, this is the quietest group of seniors ever. Now, they may not be that way at home, but in that hallway, and this is the nicest group of young people that I've encountered in a long, long time. And this is just a fun group for me, and they know that I stick my head out in the hallway, and I give them a little grief every now and again, and some of them I've known for a long, long time. But this is truly a tremendous senior class, and you're going to hear some are going to be recognized again this evening for multiple things, but you're going to see as we get to the awards ceremony that this is a senior class that has accomplished a great deal in their tenure at Cuyahoga Heights. And I always talk to the seniors the first week of school, and I tell them that every class, the hallway where the pictures are, when alumni come back, that's the toughest place to get them to leave. So whenever they take a tour, I always make sure that we go by the pictures last, because they don't ever want to leave the hallway, because they look at classes and they talk about the class, they talk about classmates, but they talk, and those are the legacies for those classes, and that every class sets its own legacy. I don't get to do it. The teachers don't get to do it. They set their own legacy by what they do and how they perform and who they are as a class. And I think the legacy for this senior class is going to be one that's going to be remembered for a long, long time. So, and this is a great representation of the leadership of that senior class. So I'm going to have a hard time watching you guys go in June. I just want you to know that. So congratulations on your all-academic awards.
Congratulations.
Nice job.
Congratulations.
Congratulations again. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Good job.
Good luck at that. Congratulations.
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 Congratulations. Nice job.
We've got some more athletic recognitions. These are district special honors. And some of the, just so you know, some of the items, the league items, there's a criteria for the academic. Some of the league items are voted on. The district honors are oftentimes voted on by media personnel. And we're in a real tough spot here at Cuyahoga Heights because we don't have any particular media coverage. If you go a little bit east, some of the schools on the eastern part of our league, Kirtland and Cardinal, they have the Lake County News Herald that has a lot of media coverage out there. If you go a little bit further west out to Lorain County, they've got the Chronicle and the Lorain Journal, so they have media coverage that nominate their students for AP and UPI recognition. The Plain Dealer it doesn't do much with high school sports, and less all the time, as a matter of fact. So for our students to get media recognition, that means people from outside our area are noticing them. Which that can be a tough thing to do sometimes. And our coaches do everything in their power to try and get stuff posted and let everybody know what our students are doing. But this year, both boys and girls basketball received some great recognition on the district level. So in boys basketball, Nassim Salem was a District 4, Division 4, District 2 Player of the Year, all district second team. Kyle Pollack, Ryan Seelig, and Sam Schaefer were all district honorable mention. In girls basketball, Brooke Wilson was all district second team, and Julia Harris and Michaela Spicer were all district honorable mention as well. Again, there's a lot of activities going on tonight, so they'll tell you about the senior class. They were coming to me today, telling me, normally they're not going to tell you they show up. I had about 5 or 6 students today say, Mr. Evans, I've got this going on, and I see some of our softball players hustle back from a game to get here tonight, so got to throw them a little bit of love, too. After a W tonight, too, huh? Atta girl. State recognition. As always, our athletes do a great job on the state level, and this year was no exception to that. This year in wrestling, Nolan Fry was All-Ohio and placed 3rd, and Luke Hopkins was a state qualifier. If you guys would come forward. Nassim Salem was honorable mention All-Ohio in basketball. In girls basketball, Brooke Wilson was honorable mention All-Ohio and academic All-Ohio. And last but certainly not least, our lady swimmers. Stephanie Atwell, Morgan Yonke, Victoria Catler, McKenna Wojtek, and Mara Wojtek were all Ohio second team. And the lady swimmers, you know, the kids know that I'm loud, okay? I just am. And the wrestlers understand that. They can hear me in the gym, but I know that the girls swimming can't hear me because their faces are in the water, but I'm up there screaming my ears off. And it just makes me feel better. But watching this group swim the last 4 years for the seniors and Kenny and Victoria the last couple of years here, I couldn't make it to the state meet this year, and it killed me. So I sent them a video, just a little congratulations, great job, sorry I wasn't there for you. And I sent it off to Mrs. Wojtek, and I said, wow, I didn't hear anything back. And I thought, man, I was worried they didn't get it. So I called her, I said, Becky, did you get, because I'm a little technologically challenged. I sent a little blurb for the girls. Did they, by chance, she goes, Mr. Evans, they're all over there crying right now. I said, so that made me start to cry. So, but I'm going to miss you ladies. And I said, Victoria and Kenny, you guys now got to carry the flag for the ladies swim team. And this group of swimmers will leave the building as having set more records in swimming than any other group in the history of Cuyahoga Heights schools. Our first time with relay teams down there, so fantastic job. So, again, congratulations to all the All-Ohio athletes. So,
Nice.
Take you out.
Another handshake. Nice job, Jared. Nice job. Nice job. We're in number 3. Yes, my favorite number. What do you play for softball?
Congratulations.
My daughter was a catcher. Yeah, you got it.
Good job. I'm so proud of you guys. Great job, buddy. You didn't do that there, did you? Oh, that makes it even better.
Was that,
That's why they.
that's why our papers were out of order.
Yeah, that's what
Thanks so
makes me-
much.
Thank you.
I mean, he's a nice guy and all, but I don't think he wants to be mean.
and we've got one last set of recognitions here. A couple people couldn't be here tonight, and it's always great when our athletes are recognized, but we had 2 coaches that were recognized this year too, and rightfully so. This year, Coach Laughlin was recognized as the District 2 Northeast Ohio Swim Coach of the Year. And Coach Laughlin is one of the most humble people that you'll ever meet. And he really, if he was here, he'd be embarrassed and he'd be blushing right now. And I think the girls would be making fun of him. And that would all be right. But Matt has done a fantastic job with our swim program. It's so great to see him recognized. And this year, in the second year as our head wrestling coach, Dave Mead was recognized as the Chagrin Valley Division Coach of the Year in wrestling. So congratulations to Coach Mead. You know, those that know me know that I'm an very old wrestler. And a couple of years ago, the wrestling program was in dire straits. The numbers had dwindled down in the program. And when we made a coaching change, I talked to Coach Mead about getting our youth back involved, and 2 years later, we win our division in the league, and we get 4 alumni involved in the program. We get 2 state qualifiers, somebody standing on the podium, and win our half of the conference, and that's in 2 years' time. I can't imagine how good we're going to be in the next 4 years. So congratulations to Coach Mead. And last but not least, I've got Nasim here standing next to me, and it's one thing to be recognized by your league. It's another thing to be recognized when one of the schools from your league ends up in the state Final Four. You know, Richmond Heights this year was in the Final Four. They won the league. They made a big run. But the coaches vote on the most valuable player in the league in basketball. And that'll tell you what the coaches in this league think about Nasim Salem and the effort that he puts forth when he gets on the basketball court. And that's a tremendous honor, because usually when teams make that kind of run in the playoffs, the MVP always comes off of that team. That's just the way it works in team sports. You recognize those players and the teams that really make that run. Well, we didn't make that run this year, but people still recognized what a force Nassim was, and for the other coaches in this league to vote Nassim as the MVP in the league is truly an outstanding accomplishment. So congratulations, Nassim. So thank you for coming tonight. Again, this is probably one of the most fun things that we get to do all year. And I know it's going to get more exciting from here because we're going to start talking about board policies, right? So I think we're going to take just a short break right now. So those of you that want to sneak out or just actually run out like your hair's on fire is okay too. But thank you for coming this evening.
It's all good.
Here's my computer. Oh,
All right.
sorry, it just logged me off. One second. Okay. So we're back. It is 7:42. And there's nobody listed under public comments, so we're gonna move right on to Mr. Muccio. Your stuff, right?
Thank you, President Schukert. Just one recommendation tonight, recommendation 5A, the minutes. Motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held March 13th, 2019, as found in attachment T1.
Okay, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Neiman,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Suchaki. Any discussion?
Hey, Dave, could you come up here for just a moment, please? Sorry, Lindy.
I lost internet briefly. It was mine went wacky too, so. Hearing none, I'm gonna move on. Is it okay, Mrs. Utter?
Yes, go ahead. I just have a technical issue here.
Okay. Hearing nothing, can I have a vote?
Mr. Naaman.
Aye.
Mr. Suchaki.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mrs. Schukert.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Treasurer's comments.
Just had one for tonight. Our updated 5-year forecast, which is coming due in May, we may want to just put on the front burner, to review it upcoming. And I apologize if I sound stuffy. My allergies are kind of
Okay,
kicking
you
in.
do.
It was Mr. Naaman last week with the allergies.
Oh, boy. Yeah, it was.
All right, moving on now to superintendent's business.
Right, I just have one item, and that's the AP conference in Orlando. I think I mentioned this in a previous note to you, that we had two groups of teachers submit proposals to present at the AP conference, and both groups, which is a rarity, were selected. So 4 of our teachers, along with Dr. Calaris and Mr. Coleman, will represent the district at the AP conference in Florida this summer, and presenters, and which is an extremely high honor for us. So we've never had anybody before been selected to present on there. So we've done a great job. AP honor roll twice in the last 5 years. So, but that's on there for the board's approval for professional development for our staff for this summer.
Excellent. Okay, so can I have hearing the information, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Naaman,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Utter. Discussion beyond that? Hearing none. Roll call.
Mr. Naaman.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mr. Suchaki.
Aye.
Mr. Schukert.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Superintendent's comments.
Okay, just under comments, I've got the, I put it in the update to you. BASA and the Ohio Department of Education are running a professional development June 6th and 7th. And this one kind of interested me because State Superintendent De Maria is going to be a part of this. And it's a different type of professional development. It's the first time BASA is doing this. And they've invited district administrative teams down, and they limited the number of teams. So I would like to take our administrative team, Mr. Muccio, our principals, Mr. Burek, Dr. Claris and myself down to that. It's 2 days, and it's really about, they're gonna take a look at our analytics, they're gonna take a look at our budget, and they're gonna take a look at our educational goals, and they're gonna work with us on how all those things work together moving forward. I think the board knows that we do an administrative retreat every year, the beginning of August out with the ESC, with a very large group that's got some great speakers, but that professional development is more or less planning for the year. In other words, working on the calendar and that type of thing, and fire drills and all those types of things that we kind of put in place over a 2-day time period. This one is more about district goals, and I will take the best goals down with us, because that's our continuous improvement plan, and try to incorporate these. So I'm excited about the opportunity to do this, so I wanted to mention that to the board, because it's on the agenda a little bit later on to be approved as a professional development for the administrative team. So they held a spot for us. We got a little bit past the deadline, and they were really good to hold a spot for us, and I think that'd be a good 2 days for the administrative team down in Columbus, so.
And everyone has expressed interest in going.
Yeah, that's kind of why I waited, because sometimes, when school gets out, sometimes administrators are like teachers, they might have vacations planned relatively quickly, so I wanted to make sure with the entire administrative team that, we're all gonna be around at that point in time, so we could do it together, because if I couldn't get everybody, I wasn't looking to do it. I wanted the entire team to be involved in it, so.
Sounds good.
Yes, it does.
Okay, moving on to professional development. Requests to attend professional conferences, we have 2. Matt Muccio, the eFinance Plus session at OASBO Annual Workshop in Columbus on 4/23, there's no cost. And then an update on the attendees that attended the OSBA Northeast Region Spring Conference in Warren. It was Tom Evans, Mark Dobbins, Lindy Schukert, Maria Eder, and Matt Muccio. And that was for $35 a person on 3/25/19. So can I have a motion to approve those requests?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Suchaki,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Naaman. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Suchaki?
Aye.
Mr. Naaman?
Aye.
Mrs. Etter?
Aye.
Mrs. Schukert?
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Okay, next thing, motion to approve board's business consent agenda. We don't, oh, we do. Why is it doing that?
What
Okay.
about the neon?
Can I have a motion to approve the board's business consent agenda?
We don't. have-
Wait,
There's one more thing under the other one, isn't there?
Is there?
No, it just, for whatever reason, it broke them out into 2 on the,
The
on the thing.
e-finance plus session?
that's what, that was in the first, that was on the
That
That was
first
Mr.
chart.
Muccio.
Oh, okay.
That was on the first chart.
Oh, I see it.
Okay.
Okay, so, but there is no
We don't have
approval.
There is no
Okay.
business, we're down to discussion.
Technical.
That's a placeholder.
Skipping on to, okay, so possible discussion items we talked about. So architect discussion is number 1.
Here's where we're at on the architect discussion. I would certainly like, we're at a point where I would, I think we have to kind of push forward to make a decision on who we want to go with, and I will tell you that I've made some additional calls. I talked to the superintendent of North Ridgeville, who was at Lakewood when GPD did some work for them, and she gave them a very excellent recommendation, and again, they work directly with Rodwell, who was here, and Matt, who has experience with. So a very glowing recommendation from the superintendent there as well. So I'm kind of run down some of those issues. And I think Mr. Suchaki, you might have talked to the Career Center, and I think you got probably the same kind of feedback.
Right, and they're doing the next project as well.
So at this point, I would like to, the board's permission to get this on the agenda to approve to one of the architects next month. And what I'll do is I'll just craft a motion to approve an architect, and I'll leave it blank, and then I'll leave it up to the board who they want to nominate and then vote on. You can have the discussion at that point in time, but that's how I would like to proceed with it unless there's some objection to that.
What was that?
Unless we want.
Yeah, well, Mark won't be here tomorrow, won't be here at the next meeting either. So when we vote on it, but I did talk to Mark before he left, just to get kind of his thoughts on some of the things too. So, I mean, can we talk about who we'd like
Absolutely.
to nominate at this point?
Absolutely.
Okay. I really liked the GPD group. I also, being a Lakewood educator, I talked to some people in Lakewood, that spoke very highly. I was impressed by their presentation. I liked how organized it was, and just, I just had a good feel, if that makes sense, just, they were personable, get professional. And I've heard really good things from Lakewood employees and administrators that have worked with them too, so that was kind of along the lines, I felt strongly about that group. I will just speak for Mark briefly, he really liked GPD also. His second choice was the AVG, and he felt like Enos Britton, just having so many different, entities involved in it, that it might not be as smooth for what we're looking for here with renovation, and not really knowing where we're going and prioritizing and things like that, that it might be more difficult working with that group.
And
Yeah,
down
go down the
if
line,
that's
that
okay.
works.
GPD was rated extremely highly by the Career Center when they were doing this selection last year. They based it on the experience at some of the member districts. Revere used them, and we're very, very happy with them as well. They ranked, there was no close second when they ranked the architects and chose for their current project, and it was GPD. Reflecting on the presentations, it was kind of interesting, just what GPD, they were very businesslike, they got it done. Not exciting, but they stayed within the time frame, right? Everybody had half an hour. Group number 2, excuse me for not remembering the name of that one. You mentioned it just a moment ago.
AVG.
Vision.
Yeah, they ran overtime, and plus that, it seemed to be a couple of working partners, they weren't one group, right? And then, of course, Enos Britton they were just gonna pull a whole bunch of people together as needed, and their presentation was the best. But I just didn't think they would fit, so I would put GPD first on my list as well.
I would agree, much for the things that you said, Lindy. I took lots of notes on the 3 presentations and went back over my notes explicitly before today's meeting. And I felt like it wasn't just that their presentation was on spot. It was the fact that it felt like everyone that they needed to be part of the project was within their own organization. They had their own engineers, they had their own architects, they had their own design people. And the fact that they had worked in our school area, the CVCC, Revere, I felt like that gave us, like they knew what they were doing, and they would do a good job for us as well. The fact that they talked about, like different grants and things like that we might be able to get, I thought that was like, thanks for telling us, and we'd love to work with you. So that's how I felt. My second choice was the Vision.
Architectural Vision Group?
Yes,
Architectural,
sorry, thanks. I couldn't remember them off track, but, so if we're considering, for me personally, GPD group is who I felt most comfortable with.
Actually, I'm gonna echo everyone's comments. I mean, the GPD seemed like it was, to me, seemed the best fit for us. I mean, they're here close by. They would, I think they're all self-contained, which will probably be a lot more smoother process overall, which I think that the other ones were pulling in different options. It might lead to more administrative costs too as well on our part, which I think that, that's probably an advantage for GPD, is that it's all self-contained. So I would agree, I would rank that number 1 as my choice too. And then Architectural Vision Group would be my second choice then as well.
And one of the questions that I had as I called around is, my only fear with GPD was that they're big. In our project, the scope of our project is in comparison to North Olmsted putting up a new building and Westlake putting new buildings up and everybody putting new buildings. I thought our scope is somewhat smaller because it's a renovation. And my fear was that if it got prioritized, that we might fall to the bottom of the list. And everybody that I talked to said that is absolutely not the case, that Rodwell is very spot on. He returns calls, he'll be on site. So that was my biggest concern with the bigger group. I thought maybe this might be an instance where the smaller firm might be a little bit more attentive to our needs. And I also talked to Fairview that has done is in a similar situation to us, has an old building, has done some major renovation to the building, very, very similar to us, and they'd worked with both GPD and AVG and worked well with both of them. But just didn't have any concerns over that they were always there, and again, Fairview's kind of right in the middle, everybody around them is building these monstrosities, and Fairview was just kind of renovating, trying to update some things within the district, so, Mr. Wagner made me feel a lot more at ease with the bigger firm. And that was the only concern that I had, and I got good response from, virtually everybody I talked to, so.
I like too that the GPD talked about, being a buffer between the board and the community, and just some of my notes, and they talked about like meetings, with the community and things like that, and I know that seems like the direction that we wanna go into with having those community meeting, you know, the meeting that we already had, and maybe having a future one to talk more monetary and things like that, so I think that that'll be a nice group to work well with us in the same vision as Mr. Swayze.
Well, it was kind of funny as I talked to a number of the superintendents, was that with any of the architectural firms, you kind of have to keep an eye on them and kind of keep them reined in, because they want to really go sometimes, and two or three superintendents said it's going to be important as you move through the process that you keep them, and that you keep the community involved in the meetings as you're going through that, and really kind of keep the board architect interaction alive as you're moving through it, to make sure that it's accomplishing the goals that you want. And because two or three of them said, you know, sometimes the architects get their feelings hurt a little bit when you say, well, I don't want to do that. That's a little bit much more than what we're kind of had in mind. We're thinking something like this over there, so. But, you know, from teaching landscaping and working with landscape architects, that's very much how they are. A lot of times the dollar sign's the last thing that they look at. They can build you a lot of different things, and we certainly, we know that that'll be a major consideration as we move forward with ours. Very good, so thank you on that.
So we're good to
Give me
put
some
that on the
direction for the
agenda.
next agenda, yes.
Awesome. Anything else with the architect?
No.
Okay, moving on to the next discussion topic, which was the nepotism policy. We were given what our current policy is, and we were also given one that was kind of similar in Beechwood. And so, does anyone have any thoughts to start off with? I don't want to
I
start.
just kind of want to,
Oh, sure.
I did a lot of searching, and to be quite honest with you, ours and Beechwood's are the only two in the county that I can find. And it's clear that ours is modeled after Beechwood's, by taking a look at it, although ours had some additional verbiage to it. Ours kind of went out of the way to add relative of a full-time employee that Beechwood's doesn't have. When I talked to other districts, they said, I asked why you wouldn't have one, and they said, why would we have one when it's covered in ORC, and conflict of interest covers everything that you would need to cover in an anti-nepotism. I said, well, okay, well, our board is interested in doing that. So that's why I also added the stuff from the Ethics Commission in there, some of those statement sheets and questions and answered, because that's kind of where it falls back to from the other district standpoint. I think Mr. Dobbins did some research on it as well, and we address in our bylaws conflict of interest as well. In 0120, we empowered ethics. We address conflict of interest as a board policy as well. So that's kind of what I dug up for you in a way of background information. So.
Yeah. And that makes sense, actually. You know what, I looked at this, and I looked at it from an audit perspective. I don't want to take a short sight of look at this, but, you know, I looked at it, and at first look at it, it's like, well, it seems like you should have an anti-nepotism policy. But then, if you look more closely to it, to your point, what you just said, Mr. Evans, is that, you know, the real problem is that, you know, is there a conflict of interest that would cause a detriment to the district? And I think that's even more important than the nepotism, you know, policy in itself, because those are disclosed, and, you know, you're making sure that those duties are separated. And so, you know, you don't want to, in a financial world, you wouldn't want to, you know, have people that have abilities to update the supplier master and also to make payments, you know, or have relatives that do that. But the conflicts of interest, though, seems carry a lot more weight than this, I think.
And I have to, and so does Mr. Muccio, have to file with the state every year,
Yeah.
our conflict of interest. We have till,
Yeah.
we just got another notice in the mail about, because once our tax is over, we have to, it's probably about, what, a 12 or 14-page document that we have to go through every year and complete and file with the state, and then the state sends us back a letter saying that there are no conflicts of interest, or this may be a potential conflict of interest
Yeah.
for us as the district leader, so.
What I saw is, looks like ours is more strict than.
It absolutely
what's
is.
In the state
It
version.
absolutely
I mean,
is.
even when it comes to identifying family,
Yes,
ours is much, we have many more people in the family included.
yeah,
in
that's,
ours.
I would agree with that
And
observation.
even that with Beechwood, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, like I said, that family was added throughout ours, that was not part of Beechwood's.
So I would like to propose getting rid of it.
Well, let me,
Oh, go ahead, I'm
Okay,
sorry, well,
okay.
go ahead, Gary.
okay, I'll, from a historical perspective, since I'm the one who's been at the table the longest, this was put in place because there was concern about an abuse of nepotism policy, which occurred 8-10 years ago. I was not on the board at the time. And it got a lot of people very upset, and that's why they put the policy in, so it wouldn't happen again. It doesn't bother me to keep it, and the reason it doesn't is that the Beechwoods, for example, and leaves a little bit discretion, you know. It says, you can't do this in the background. You can't influence people in the background. You can't, you know, but it doesn't give enough, it doesn't give specifics that say, you can't influence about these people, you can't even, these people aren't even eligible. So you keep out that possibility of potential nepotism violation. That's why it was put in, because we had a problem. And that's why it's there. And sorry to cut you off, but I lean toward keeping it, simply to keep that discipline in place, so that we don't go there again, that we don't have people accusing board members of pushing their own family members to become full-time members of the staff.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
whether you vote on it or not is.
Well, it's a discussion item right now, so I guess
Right.
the.
No, I didn't mean vote. I mean,
Right.
I was sorry, I was just finishing my
No, no,
thought.
no,
and
that's-
You started talking, and I was still thinking. I apologize for interrupting you. But, you know, not voting was not considered enough, because stuff can go on in the background, and you don't, you know, and that stuff's all hidden. You don't hear about it. That's why taking the positions and putting them first eliminated that possibility. So that's why that makes our policy different from the others. So that, okay. I'm
So
done.
I still feel strongly about this as an educator. I want the best person in. I don't care if they're related to me, Joe, Maria, you know, or Gary. In a small community like this, where a lot of alumni come back, I think that it's important for us to have the best candidate. And as a board member, I trust my superintendent and treasurer, but you're not part of this decision when it comes to making like employees outside of the treasurer's office. I trust that, you know, the people that we employ are taking the steps to do it. And I have a lot of faith in the process, being able to watch like a principal being hired. And just the steps that are taking. It's not just Mr. Evans interviewing one-on-one a candidate and saying, oh, I picked this person. It is a process, and a more thorough process that I think I've seen in the past, especially with as many applicants as we get. I was really impressed that there are many steps, there are many levels, if you will, the different, what am I trying to say? There's like 3 interviews possible.
right.
Steps that they have to take, and the first one, tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Evans, you're not even involved in.
I'm not involved to the end.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so it's a team of teachers or staff members, depending on the role of what the position is, that interview, and I love, again, that team process makes or breaks something like this, a special relationship or somebody begging for their family member to be hired. It kind of eliminates that, because it is a team process. And then, you know, with Mr. Coleman, we as board members were even involved. You know, and I I really liked to watch that process evolve, and, you know, being a family of educators, I'm putting it out there, like, you want the best person in the role, and if it happens to be someone that I'm related to, or someone that one of us is related to, I don't think that harms it, as long as we're not voting when they are hired, as long as we're following the ethical laws and things like that, that we're being true to ourselves. And as public servants, we take an oath, and there has to be a level of trust in all this. And as far as what happened in the past, part of me gets so frustrated with that, because nothing was ever proven. And not only that, but that individual is doing an outstanding job when it comes to test scores. So when you talk about producing as somebody that just came in as a family member of a board member, that person is doing the job of what they were hired to do. And so, you know, there's a lot of things that have happened in our past, especially dysfunctional things that have happened on this Board of Education. But if we continue to move in the right direction by hiring people that are doing good things and doing good things for our students, that's where the focus needs to be. That's my spiel.
Well, I guess what my thoughts were, so it's like, what does this policy give you that a conflict of interest policy would not? I guess that would be the question. I mean, because it's really, I mean, because it's almost that, you know, from a company's, you know, a corporate standpoint, I mean, actually companies reward others for bringing in people that they know, because, you know, good people know good people, and you hire them. But the main thing, I think, is that from a control perspective, is that you separate those jobs if there's a conflict that's possible. What I'm looking at is like misappropriation of assets is probably the big thing that you would worry about in a conflict of interest, because you know, let's face it, like it's that, you know, is this, you know, this is like a, I think the conflicts of interest holds a lot more weight than this, because it's actually a control. And if you're looking at the controls, I mean, it's not your hiring processes, and it's not that you have a relative that is employed here. It's the matter of whether their job duties are separated between conflicts of interest. I don't know, that's where I think, but.
I almost feel like, you know, there was a reason why this was put in place. But I almost feel like our school policy here is more strict than what is available, that maybe it just needs to be toned down.
It's definitely more
You
restrictive.
know, maybe it needs to be in
Yeah.
place, so we don't give the perception that we don't care about this, because it is an important issue. And, but maybe it just needs to be toned down. Maybe it just needs to be revised and just stay in place, but maybe in a revised form that maybe isn't as strict as it has become.
Well, I think it's just interesting, the person that was spearheading this, you know, added, oh, but you know, the relatives can get a seasonal job, they could be, I mean, the whole thing is just so, if you want to be transparent, it was put in place because of one board member's agenda, personal agenda, and that agenda existed until that person was gone. And, you know, I think we need to remember what our job as board members actually is. Our job is not to hire. Our job is to, you know, hire a treasurer and superintendent that do a good job. So I don't want this to go to a vote until Mark's here, just because I think that, you know, I did talk to Mark, and I know Tom's talked to Mark, but I don't want to speak for him on something like this, because I don't want to mince words inappropriately. So I think when he gets back, he can share kind of his take on it. But just so you know, my position, I'm all for absolutely getting rid of it. The idea too with board policy, we've had plenty of board members who didn't follow any of the policies, so it doesn't really hold anything to have it in board policy. I mean, it really doesn't. It's just more paper.
I'll bring it back up, and I'll put it back on the May agenda then when Mark's back, but
Okay.
this is a good discussion to have. I kind of dug up as much as I could in the way of resources from the Ethics Commission. I'll continue to look around at there. I also talked to John Britton about it at great length, and and John has pretty much backed up what he has said here, as well, so, you know, just to get the details from him about the specifics about it, so,
Thank you.
And one last comment too with this, like, I think what was brought up before, it's like, I guess one last comment is that, you know, nepotism policy has nothing to do with either a full-time or part-time employee, it has to do with relations. I mean, I guess that's the one other last comment that I would have on this too, so, you know, that, you know, whether we choose to get rid of it or we choose to basically modify it, I mean, I think that has to go one way or another. We gotta make it a stand one way or another, one direction. It's either goes all, or we basically have to modify this so that gets rid of that, because it has, nepotism has nothing to do with whether they're full or part-time, so.
I like that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I do too.
It should not have been written with the exception if we wanted to.
There's no way that should be included in there. It's either, we have to either be all in or we're out.
Right,
So,
I would agree with that.
good.
Okay. We good to move on?
Sure.
Okay, item 3 is the superintendent treasurer evaluation timeline. And I don't wanna put you guys on the spot, but have you guys like looked at, do you need it from me, the spreadsheet? Okay, I'll send that to you. But if you guys can just look over the spreadsheets, for lack of a better word, and maybe think about some ideas that might fall into each category, which are really the pillars of, the BEST committee. Looking at maybe sometime in May or probably June. I think in May, we would meet as a board in executive session to kind of go over our evaluation. And then, if you guys, I'm going out loud.
Here's what let me suggest. You know,
Please.
last time when we went through this process, you kind of gave me the outline, and then I met with the administrative team, and we kind of went through and filled in what we had worked on in those different goals. And then I forwarded that to the board to look at. Matt and I could show Matt what we had done previously with that format, and Matt and I could sit down and get it, hopefully get a spread, you know, get that similar spreadsheet to you with the specific goals, and then what we believe we've accomplished, what we're still working on, and what we have yet to work on, you know, that our goals moving forward. So that would give you kind of a place to start, something to look at, to evaluate first and foremost, and then we could go from there with it. Matt, that work for you?
So do you guys think you could have that maybe by May, or is
Yes,
that pushing
yeah.
it? Okay, and then May, we'll see what the agenda looks like next week, maybe for the future, I don't know, we can talk further
No,
about
absolutely,
which
we
May
can.
meeting.
The goal is that you will have that the Friday before the May work session, so you'll have
Oh,
that to
okay.
look at, and then if you guys wanna go into executive session to talk about what Matt and I have forwarded to you, then that'll give you some time to do that.
Okay. And then I think the ultimate thing, and I know I've talked to Mark about it, is how we wanna present. In the past, we had 2 board members meet with, the individuals. So it wasn't a board meeting, cause it was just 3 of us meeting, 2 board members and one of the leaders of the district. I know that I've talked to Mark, and he would like to see the full board, and I really like that idea, because I think we are equals. So I just kinda wanted to make sure with you guys that would be okay.
Absolutely.
It'd be done in
Just let's not do
executive
it over
though,
dinner, cause
right?
like, I don't wanna throw up. People were like, why didn't you
Going
order
back to
dinner?
all
I'm
sorts
getting
of stuff.
evaluated, I really would rather not throw up my dinner while I'm being evaluated, so I said,
Okay.
I don't know that that will bode well, so.
So the meeting will probably be in June
Okay.
that we do that. So following that timeline, and then kind of along that line, item number 4 is board evaluation, and Mark had talked about a lot of the things that trainings he had gone to, they talk about a self-evaluation for the board. So maybe start thinking about that, and if you have ideas, we can talk about
And
that.
I'll get some stuff forward to you. That's one of the things that a couple of meetings that I've been to recently talked about, really in some flyers that I got in the mail, just the value of the board being able to kind of take a look at what you've done, what your practices are, what your procedures are, is a reflective tool, is a good thing to do once a year, just to say.
totally agree.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, we've been doing, I personally think we've been doing that informally among ourselves over the last, this current board,
Yeah.
over the last year or so, but I think I agree, it's probably a good idea to formalize it.
Okay, So moving on to the policy and bylaw reviews. I'll hand it over to you, Mr. Evans.
Okay, it looks like a lot, but you'll notice the first four are virtually identical, so I'm just gonna pull up policy A. They just fall under different, what Neola does and what actually OSBA does too is sometimes they fall in different sections of the board policy, so it's verbatim the same policy. The first one is non-discrimination and equal employment opportunity, and what you'll see that's a 16-pager, and they make a recommendation there that you have two, a male and a female. Due to our size, that doesn't fit for us. Dr. Caleres is our district compliance officer. I think we've had minimal number, but I think they've been handled very professionally, very well here. You see that the darkened paragraph is some new verbiage. And on page 2, we kind of adjusted that a little bit from what it had been. It's gonna be in the staff handbook and it'll be on the district website. We don't necessarily do an annual report, so I don't wanna strap us into saying, oh, well, you didn't do this. Well, if we didn't do an annual report, it's not gonna get done. We keep things updated on the website. We update the staff handbook every year. Those are the two most logical places. We don't have individual schools, so it's on the district website, so people can access our policy very easily there. And then, I don't believe there's too many changes throughout it, as I'm scrolling through. There's a strikeout on page 6 at the bottom. All materials generated as part of the informal complaint process will be retained by the compliance officers in accordance with the board's record retention policy. And the checkoff on this decision of the superintendent, that's the same as what we have had in previous policies. And there's another strikeout on the public records. So that had to be a law change with the reason that was stricken out. And then the retention of there's an addition, the retention of the investigatory records and materials. That's the new law that's inserted, which is the reason for the redo of the policy.
Is that on a specific
That's on the
page?
bottom of page 12 and runs on to page 13. That's all new, all the dark black part of that. We did not add the last section of that as the drafting note, so that's the same policy. So please take a look at that. If you've got questions, that would be the difference between what our current policy is and what's in, what the new, and that's actually 1422, 2260, 3122, and 4122. It just pertains to programs, administration, professional staff, and classified staff. It has to fall in each category there. So those are essentially the same four policies, verbiage-wise, just different groups. Dropping down to policy E, school choice options. School choice options, they had to change this because No Child Left Behind is gone, and the ESEA has been amended, so that's the change in that policy. Federal law changed. Removal, suspension, expulsion. Policy 5160. Or 5610, I apologize. 5610 there. The checkoff on that is the same. The superintendent may require a student to participate. Actually, that's new. That's not in our current policy. To participate in a community service program or another alternative consequence for a number of hours equal to the remaining part of the period of the suspension. This allows some flexibility at the end of the school year because you can't carry them over and still kind of get. We're still working with the villages. At one time, the diversion program was very strong with the 3 villages. We haven't had a need for it lately, so it's kind of drifted a little bit. Mike Tulsowitz in Brooklyn Heights is kind of working with me on making sure that if the need should arise, that we would bring the diversion program back in place for students that might need that possibility. We haven't needed it the last few years, which is a good thing. So on the bottom of page 2, This is the law change that a student will receive at least partial credit for completed assignments. Grade reductions on account of a student's suspension are permitted. However, no student may receive a failing grade on a completed assignment solely on account of his or her suspension. You know, there was a lot of discussion about that in the state. That's, a lot of districts would make the kids make up the work and then not give them zero credit for it. I guess I never understand that approach to things. And actually, the whole makeup credit is a large discussion that we're going on right now. We didn't get into a percentage on that because we didn't want to. We hope that common sense prevails on that part of it. Certainly, there's things that, because of the coursework, some of it builds on the other, so the student needs to have you just can't skip a section of the curriculum, but if a student is suspended, you want to get them back up to speed as quickly as possible, and very oftentimes, certain parts of that work are part of that. So I don't think that there were any other changes to that. That was the law change in it. Suspension and expulsion of students in pre-K, kindergarten through 3. These are the timelines with the implementation of the phase out of that. 19-20 school year, your district must reduce the number of out-of-school suspensions and expulsions issued to students in grades pre-K through 3 for offenses not listed in paragraphs A to D below by at least 25%, using the numbers reported in the 18-19 school year. So that's, this is more of affects the bigger schools. I don't know that we've had.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we even do that?
Yeah, reduce from 0 is 0, so.
Yeah.
And that, this just deals with those, that, the reduction in suspensions, that policy, that whole section, that whole policy is about the pre-K through 3, about keeping kids in school and working with PBIS and some of those intervention systems to try and alter behavior versus just kind of firing kids out of school, with the exception being if it's, you know, weapons and real severe instances. And if you remember correctly, we talked about that. The state even went through and redefined weapons, and so, you know, a knife, the definition of a knife, it had to be a knife that could, you know, cause serious injury, because one district in the state of Ohio there was a little pen knife that was on a nail clipper that a student got expelled for. So, you know, sometimes common sense gets taken out of the equation, so. And then the community service on page 13, again, which we believe is a good option for us here at Cuyahoga Heights. Emergency policy G, emergency removal of students, 561003. This includes on page 2, new language: the student makes a bomb threat to a school building or any premise at which a school activity is occurring at the time of the threat. This just adds one more possibility to the expulsion process in that verbiage, so. That's new language there. And school safety, H, 8400. On page 3, 5, we check off use of temporary door locking devices as permitted by the law. We just added those bolo sticks, so we certainly want the policy to allow us to use them as a safety device. And then we went option 2, which was the same option that we had before. Students may participate in emergency management tests at the discretion of the principal. In deciding whether and to what extent to involve students in an emergency management test, the principal should consider what benefits student inclusion in an emergency management test may have in that student's population's preparation for emergency and to enhance the safety of students in the building. Should also consider age-appropriate participation, guidance, and training in preparation for students' participation in the test. And we take that into consideration, but just know that we have to document with OD also that we've either done a tabletop, a live exercise on an annual basis, an evac drill, which we have had no issues being compliant with here at Cuyahoga Heights. The threat assessment, that's new. The threat assessment team, and actually Chief Sturgill was at a seminar where they talked a lot about threat assessment teams, so that's going to be a topic of discussion this summer. And quite honestly, again, because of the size of our district, our threat assessment team will probably be built out of the safety committee, and then include possibly building principals, guidance counselors along with that to get some additional student information from that. But that's kind of on the summer to-do list, the threat assessment team. That's kind of the next step in the process as we move forward with that on the safety plan. So I was actually looking for a seminar that I could go to that maybe update me on that. And actually, Chief Sturgill kind of stumbled upon it. He saw a flyer came across his desk. He was the only police officer that was at it. It was all school personnel. But there was some really good information there, he said, and so he brought it kind of back to us, and we're gonna go from there with it. Food services, policy 8500. Let's see if it'll come up for me. There we go. The change on this one is page 3. We went, and we checked off, if determined appropriate by a team of qualified individuals, including but not limited to the principal, school nurse, parent, director of food service, and 504 coordinator, substitutions to the standard meal requirements may be made at no additional charge for a student who is not on a disabled person but has. So this allows us to make some, this added 504 students to this, where we can do some dietary substitutions for students that are fall a little bit outside of what the guidelines are. Then again, the guidelines are very restrictive, as most of you know right now. You've been kind of part of the board as we've gotten squeezed on some of the things that, what's happening in our food service area. Although I will tell you that from our appearances are that I think we do better than a lot of schools. We talk to people at bigger districts, and the amount of food that gets thrown away because they're following the guidelines is phenomenal. I don't see a lot of that. I think Pam has done a great job of making some à la carte choices down there, so kids could get what they want. We're not getting the waste that maybe other districts are getting with their lunches, so. And actually, I think the big swing, when all the changes were made, is that it went back to like when I was in school, more kids were just bringing their lunch instead of getting what was in the lunch night. For a long time, very few kids were bringing their lunch because you had fried this and fried that. So they wanted French fries with pizza and onion rings, so that was we can't even have fryers in the kitchen anymore, so, so
The good old days.
it's kind of come full circle.
Yeah.
May not have been so good for our health, however.
Exactly. All right, so that was the first reading on
First reading on
those
those.
policies. So moving on, possible committee reports and comments. Mr. Naaman, take it away.
Actually, well, I think first thing is that I'd like to congratulate everybody. I mean, it is, like Mr. Evans said, it's a great day when we get to recognize so many people, and so many students in our district, between, the science and the math accomplishments to the athletic performances and the conference and state recognitions. It seems like we're second to none, and I love these days, really, I really do. Secondly, we had a finance committee meeting on April 1st, and in attendance was Mr. Evans, Mr. Muccio, and Mr. Al Martin, too. We had discussed a number of things. We discussed a little bit of the capital improvement plan. We also discussed, potential future, possibilities for levies that Mr. Muccio did some research on. And we had some discussions around, I think it was, I'm trying to think who else. I think we talked a little bit about the forecast too as well. So that's really it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flower.
I would like to say, I'm so glad that I met so many future professors, scientists, and engineers there earlier today. Our math scholars and science scholars were just fantastic, and congratulations to all our outstanding athletes as well. I'd also like to say thanks to Mr. Birch for arranging the Camp Leaf Bridge to be at Cuyahoga Heights this year. Understand that'll be beneficial to our students as well as the students that we serve, and also savings for us, so that's good. I'd like to say thanks to Mr. Claris for his efforts in getting a $14,000 grant to install additional cameras in the buses and vans. I'm all for that. Anything that keeps our students safe, and leads me to, I attended the OSBA Safety Summit, March 6th, I think it was. Just a couple of things from that session. In 2018, there were 103 incidents, school incidents, 60 deaths, 88 injuries, believed to be the highest number of incidents recorded in a year. If that doesn't give you cause to pause and think about what's happening, I don't know what will. They talked about, you know, the typical shooter being a male, 16 or 17, how 1 out of 5 students being bullied, what not to do with a bullied student, what not to say to a bullied student. 1/5 of all students have some mental health issues. 1 out of 3 suicides, that's not their first attempt. All of those type of things were discussed as in addition to emergency operation plans, updating them every 3 years, getting parental consent for our students participating in drills, social media and threats to schools, that's a big thing they talked about too. And also they talked about the SROs and, you know, new training that they have to undergo. They also talked about staff carrying weapons and how it is not required and not recommended to be part of board policy, because if it is, then it becomes public record, and you don't want the public to know which staff are carrying weapons, which I thought was an interesting point. They talked about door barricades and, you know, school plans and things like that too. But just wanted to say thanks again to the board for allowing me to go to that safety summit, and I wanted to share some of the highlights from it. I do have the packet of information too that they gave us if anybody wants to look at it at any time.
Is there any way maybe we could get it to Mr. Evans to like scan to all of us?
Yeah, I'd like to,
That would be great.
yeah.
It sounds like a really good,
I have
Sounds really
it,
good.
I have it here. And,
Yeah.
I mean,
Is it
I took-
okay to
Yeah,
ask
I
to
don't
do
care.
that?
My little notes are on the side,
That's
but
okay.
you can
So
see,
that's
I
still
can do
good.
that.
it sounds like a wonderful.
I'm pretty sure I have it here,
That's a
I'll
good
keep
start.
looking.
That'd be good
Yeah, no.
preparation for our upcoming
Mhm.
executive session when we discuss our safety program.
If I
Okay.
didn't bring it with me,
It's okay, I mean, there's no rush.
Yeah.
It's,
okay.
but thank you,
You've done it.
thank you, thank you.
A couple of things, at the Career Center, we did pass, trying to make sure I'm not repeating myself, and I apologize if I do, because the last several weeks have been a little bit difficult to keep track of what I'm doing when. But at the last Career Center meeting, we did pass the first year of the facilities upgrade plan, starting with the HVAC system, HVAC system, because you gotta cut holes in the roof, and they don't wanna go fixing roofs until you're finished playing with the roofs, so, that's the part that they're getting started with. I don't remember the exact numbers, I apologize, didn't bring them with me, but it was originally spec'd around 1.3 million, and then they changed the design, somebody said, wait a minute, there's a better way to do this, and they got it down to the 800,000, 900,000 range.
That's significant. It's a
which is-
significant decrease.
Pretty, yeah, pretty significant decrease, to say the least, so. So that part is underway. We had to pass it at our last meeting, because the very next day, they ordered the equipment. So that they could get it, all the work done during the summer, right? So, that's the way that did. Did I mention LEDs the last time? Because that's on our plan. I think this is, there's also a 5-year facility plan. I don't think I mentioned this in the last meeting. And this is beyond all that other stuff. And they talked about some of the security systems, how to do total lockdowns and so on. And then I found it interesting that in the very last year, the 5-year plan, they said they're gonna look at it, putting in LEDs because of the savings. And I said, you know, by the end of the 5 years, you could pay for the LEDs if you did it now. I made that comment at the meeting. And I don't know that they're gonna change it, but based on what we're doing here, and I cited what we're doing here, we're doing LED first because the paybacks is the fastest.
The LED guy at the last meeting I went to said he's done sheets for districts that's show them how much they're losing each year by not making the change.
Yeah.
Like they'll come in and say, if you make it this year, here's what you save. If you wait 3 years, this is the additional electric
that you'll
They
pay.
get the electric bills by not doing it up front. So.
Yeah, so I'm gonna catch Dave
Yeah.
and talk to him about that again. We had, 2 months ago, we had a machinist presentation where one of the instructors came in and talked about what's the big deal about being a machinist. Sounds like a 50s, 40s, 30s kind of career path, not anymore.
Yeah.
And among other things, they showed us, they gave each one of us one of these, and I can pass that around, you can take a look at it, but a little game that they made in Machine Shop, using all of the modern tools that they have, so, you wanna take a look?
I wanna play with that.
Yeah, and you can play with that for the rest of the meeting, or at least the rest of my presentation, anyway.
That's neat. Very neat.
The highest starting wage coming out of the Career Center
Yes,
is
that's
the
really neat.
machinist kids. The machinist kids are probably starting at about $17 or $18 an hour. And then once other machine shops know that they're trained, they're being offered bonuses to jump to other companies. The biggest discussion we had with local machinists here is that some of the small shops are upset because they bring people in, they can't pay them what the big shops do, but then they train them, and then the big shops swoop in and say, we'll give you a $10,000 signing bonus if you stay for 2 years and pay you $2 more an hour, and they can't hold on to them. I had that discussion at the mayor's breakfast a couple weeks ago, that their frustration with their mom and pop businesses, they can't compete on that level, and they're just trying to hold on to people that they're training.
yeah, so that is an excellent career path, and we fortunately have an excellent machinist instructor who has that program very well filled, which is good. One of the savings that they are doing is starting next year, they will no longer print course catalogs. That's kind of been in planning,
You
is
just
there,
have them online.
yeah, everything will be online. So it saves, I don't remember the
Printing and
amount,
money.
but it does save a significant amount of money every year. Because most people are doing this stuff online anyway. So phasing them out.
The truth is, for years, Chicago Heights didn't get theirs printed by the Career Center. We were the only school, I got here in 2010, they started printing ours in 2012. We were the only district not having our course catalog printed by them. Previous administration didn't want our stuff and their stuff mixed together, so we printed ours separately.
Okay. But they're gonna stop, so that's a money savings thing. We added some work sessions to our schedule, and that pretty much covers Career Center. Last week, I went to the makeup session called Accountability, that was at the ESC, and there were a couple of things that struck me about that. One of them was, as I'm sitting there listening to what they're saying, I'm saying, wow, we're already doing that. It made me feel good, and a lot of it is the BEST committee. And no other district is doing anything like the BEST committee. There were a couple that were talking about plans, but those 5-year plans generally are make nice little books, and you present them once, you put it on the shelf, and they sit there for 5 years until you decide you need a new one. But by having this ongoing committee run by an outsider, incorporating all of the people that it incorporates, nobody else had anything like that. And it just points out to me that we are doing some good things here.
Yeah.
The other thing that was interesting, and this goes right back to the construction conversations that we've had now, over a couple of times this evening, is the instructor said, introduce yourself and tell me one thing that you're proud of that's going on, in your district. And went all the way around the room, and almost everyone talked about their new building they were putting up. That they were proud of their new building, that they were bringing things up to date, that they were gonna, whatever it was, right? And it came to me and I said, I'm proudest of the fact that our district financially sits in the middle of the county. It's, family income, we sit in the middle of the county. But our students, we compare them against the highest income districts in the county, right? And that's because that's where we're achieving. I said, and that's the thing I'm proudest of, that we have an average income and above average performance by our students.
Because we reach new heights.
Because we go out, because we aspire to reach new heights, yes. So, I put that out there, and the instructor went, oh, that's very good. So, I think we should all be proud of the good job we're doing.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being our cheerleader
Yeah,
there.
thank you.
Yeah, I like to do a little of that. every now and then. Mr. Schukert, I'm done.
And I'm gonna keep it brief. I echo exactly what you were saying, Mr. Naaman, just with all the accomplishments, this is one of the funnest, most fun nights. Is it funnest or most fun?
Honest is not a word.
Most fun.
It's the greatest.
You got the gavel,
It's-
however you
it's
wanna
the
say
gre-
it.
Greatest.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's
You're running
late,
the meeting,
all
so
right,
I'm
it's
saying-
I
late.
don't know, aren't there the funniest videos? Come on, I think
You're
it
right,
is a
I-
word.
Funniest, but not funnest.
Oh, funny.
I love it.
Okay, anyway,
All right, it's not an
Um,
English class.
yeah, exactly, and it's late, so this is a great night. I'm excited that we tackled in that grant, that one of the items that the community members brought up, which was vans on, or, see, I can't even talk, cameras on
Cameras on the
vans.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And all the buses, so I think that's really, it's good that we're starting even just with some grant money. Just buses, okay,
Yeah,
thank
that's
you
good
for the
to see.
clarification. Baby steps. All right, so that's all I'm gonna say, just, and I know, like, there's some really good things happening with some of our spring teams.
Yeah.
Baseball's doing amazing, I love watching it, and hearing about the scores. In softball, it sounds like they had a win tonight too, so get out, maybe the weather will be nice and we can all have pollen inhaled in our lungs.
And bring your allergy pills.
Okay, so moving on to, future agenda items. We do have 3 that you can see listed, actually 2. Architect approval in May, which we talked about, and then also the Brooklyn Heights tax abatement, we will be talking about and voting on April 24th.
As soon as I have the agreement from David Seed, I will forward that to you, as I have been with the other stuff. So David, and as you saw in the last update, we were just down to that one issue with that first year payment. I think everything else was they had verbally agreed to, so it's just how that first payment was gonna be dispersed.
Aren't
And-
they voting on it on April 23rd?
Yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty. Anything else for future agenda items that you could think of? Moving right along, it should be noted that the Board of Education members received their agendas several days prior to the actual meeting. Thus, they have had considerable opportunity to study it, ask questions, etc. Regular meetings coming up in the future, April 24th, May 15th, May 29th, June 12th, and June 26th, all here in the Bonneray Media Center at 7 p.m. At this time, I would like to move that the board adjourn to executive session pursuant to ORC Section 121.22 G1 for the purpose of discussing the employment of personnel, and ORC Section 121.22 G5 matters to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations or state statutes. Can I have a motion? Or I made a
I'll
motion,
second
so can
that.
I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion made by Schukert, seconded by Mr. Naaman. Vote, please.
Mrs. Schukert,
Aye.
Mr. Naaman,
Aye.
Mrs. Etter,
Aye.
Mr. Souchaki.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Time is 8:44.
And I'm gonna make a suggestion, since there's nobody here, Dave, can we just turn the mics off and do it in here? I mean, as opposed to moving, is that okay with
That's
everybody?
fine.
Oh, that's a
it.
great idea.
It is 10:06, and we are back on April 10th, 2019, from executive session. I'll make a motion to reconvene. Can I have a second?
I actually
So,
just, yeah.
moved. Oh,
Just need to-
second.
We just need to you just need to call the roll, that's all. The only
Okay.
motion you need is to
Okay, it says motion to reconvene
adjourn.
open
Does it
session.
really? Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's okay.
Okay,
do
so,
it.
so first by Schukert, second by Mrs. Etter. Roll call. Mrs. Schukert, aye. Mrs. Etter,
Aye.
Mr. Souchaki.
Aye.
Mr. Naaman.
Aye.
Motion passes and 4-0 and 4 are present, 1 absent. Can I please have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Naaman, seconded by Mr. Souchaki, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned at 10:07.